The alternative to Trump
Mm,
would have been, I think, disastrous.
that's fair.
The unbelievably radical pro-abortion
Hmm.
position, all 9 months nationalized, the removal of any conscience protections for medical professionals to
Right.
participate in abortions, the radical trans agenda,
Hmm.
the attacks on free speech, creating essentially a censorship system that means that if you dissent from any government approved messages, you'll be silenced.
Let me begin. While there's still ink left in my pen, I'm set to contend. For truth, you can bet will offend. Deception within the church, man, who's letting them in. We talked about this years ago. Let's address it again. Yeah, and I ain't really trying to start beef, but some who claim to be part of the sheep got some sharp teeth. And cats get mean when you criticize them. But Jesus told us Matthew 7:16, we can recognize them. And God forbid that for the love of some fans, I keep
Hey
quiet
guys,
and
welcome
watch them
to the
die with
TC
their blood
Cook
on my
Show on the
hands. So
Clearly
there's
Speaking
nothing left for me
Network.
to do
Listen,
except
we
to
aim to
continue
speak clearly on cultural topics using a biblical worldview. As always, we appreciate you guys. We love you guys. And today we have with us Dr. Glenn Sunshine, who just recently in the past maybe year or so has become a Hoosier. And we're gonna count him as that because that's what I am. And so I'm excited to have him on the show today. Dr. Sunshine, thank you so much for coming on. This show is brought to you by Zach's Creamery in Montgomery or Jasper, Indiana. Zach's Creamery was founded with creating a pleasant and memorable experience in mind. They strive to serve the most exceptional homemade ice creams and signature coffees in an exuberant atmosphere. Zach's has something for everyone, as he features several items for those with special dietary needs such as vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, and no sugar-added, keto, diabetic friendly. Visit them today in Montgomery or Jasper, Indiana. You can dine in or drive through, but whichever way you choose, do not forget you can order online and have it waiting for you when you get there. Order online at zaxcreamery.com. That's Zach's Creamery, Z-A-X Creamery.com, and stop in at Montgomery or Jasper, Indiana. Hey everyone, today I want to talk to you about a company that has been a staple in the Midwest for nearly 2 decades, Raber Portable Storage. If you're in need of quality storage solutions, look no further. Whether it's a barn, shed, or garage, Raber has the largest selection of handcrafted storage structures in all of Indiana. Each building is made with care by experienced craftsmen, ensuring you get a product that not only looks great, but is built to last. And guess what? They stand by their workmanship with a fantastic 5-year warranty. What sets Raber apart? It's their commitment to customer satisfaction. From the moment you step into one of their many locations, their friendly team is ready to help solve your storage issues. Plus, they deliver up to 250 miles from their main office in Montgomery, Indiana. So if you live in Ohio, Kentucky, or Illinois, you need to give them a call. Now, let me tell you about the heart behind Raber Storage. It all started back in 2000 when they began building sheds full time. The founder grew up helping his father construct barns with just gas-powered skill saw and a lot of determination. Today, Raber has grown into a full-fledged operation with dedicated staff, but that personal touch still remains. They treat every customer like family. So if you're ready to find perfect storage solution, visit Raber Portable Storage. They have Indiana locations in Bloomington, Seymour, Vincent, Spencer, Corydon, West Lafayette, Sellersburg, and Kokomo, and even Tilton, Illinois. So you'll never have to go too far for quality storage. And hey, we got a deal for you today. If you mention you heard it from the podcast, Rabers will give you $150 off your barn purchase. That's right. You save $150 off your purchase by just mentioning you heard it here on the podcast. So check out their website at raberportablestorage.com. That's raberportablestorage.com to learn more and find your nearest location. Trust me, when you choose Raber, you're not just buying a shed, you're investing in quality craftsmanship and service you can rely on.
Well, thanks for having me.
So for my listeners, just tell a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and then also all the things you have going on, whether it's podcasting and writing, art, all the stuff you've got going on. Just let them know kind of who you are.
Okay, yeah. I've actually been a Hoosier for more than the past year.
Oh,
We moved here about 3 years ago, in 2021. At that point, I retired from 27 years of teaching at Central Connecticut State University,
right,
where I was a history professor specializing in Renaissance and Reformation Europe, but also doing medieval, and a few other things.
right.
Uh, I worked with Chuck Colson on worldview stuff for the last 8 years of his life, teaching in a program that was then called the Centurions, now called the Colson Fellows, and I still
Yeah,
work with the Colson Center. I'm a senior fellow with the Colson Center. Um, I also work with Reflections Ministries under Ken Boa. I am on a podcast called the Theology Pugcast. That's
that's right.
PUG
Yeah.
Pugcast, with Chris Wiley and Tom Price. And I have my own ministry as well called Every Square Inch Ministries that's found at esquareinch.org.
Nice, nice.
So, and these things more or less keep me off the streets.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, it is amazing more and more, as the internet has been able to connect a lot of people, right, through social media and different things. And obviously podcasts, people start to learn about each other and kind of what they're doing. But it amazes me more and more the work ethic of Christians, right? The work ethic of believers. I think we have a lot of work to do as far as some people don't work nearly as hard as they should. But the kind of the world that I kind of subject myself to inside of social media and all that stuff, there's just a lot of people working hard, and they're working hard for the glory of God. They're working hard for the kingdom. They're trying to educate people on the gospel and the fact that it is every square inch, right? You might be happy to know this, since you run a ministry called Every Square Inch, that I just got a new puppy, right? And we named him Kuiper. That's what
Piper.
we named him. So, and it was on purpose, right? And because that's not a typical name you name a dog. And a lot of people think it's Piper. No, 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 it's Kuiper, after Abraham Kuyper. So, excited that's your ministry, and because I really do enjoy Abraham Kuyper. Reading his messages, his sermons, and his quotes are just incredible.
Yeah, obviously the name was an adaptation of Kuyper's quote.
Correct.
But one of the things that I think was an advantage for me as a historian, especially with the kind of background I had, is it lets me play in a lot of different areas. I
Mm,
mean, so I've done a lot, obviously, with history, but that carries me into politics. I've written books on that.
yeah.
Slaying Leviathan
Yep.
being probably the most important thing I've done in that area. But it lets me work in social history. I've done things with economics. I've done things with plague. I've done things, I'm a church historian. I can work in all kinds of different areas, which is why the Kuiper quote that Every Square Inch was sort of adapted from just seemed really appropriate for what I try to do. I work in a lot of different kinds of
Yeah.
areas.
And then the greatest part is he said that as they're opening up a college, right, in Amsterdam, if I'm not mistaken, and he
Yeah.
was literally claiming, and it was close to the end of the speech, right, and he claimed that there is not a square inch of the earth, of this world, that Jesus does not claim and proclaim. I think he said mine, right, and I might have butchered it a little bit, but that's the essence of it.
Yeah. What's interesting is people leave out the sentence before that.
Mm,
And the sentence before it is that there's no part of our our mind that should be hermetically sealed.
mm,
Everything, the implication is everything is connected to everything else.
yeah,
Nothing should be hermetically sealed. And because all of them find their integration in Christ is
that's
really
right.
is where that goes, which is why there's not a single square inch in the whole domain of human experience over which Christ, who is Lord of all, does not cry, mine.
Yeah. Yep. And that's actually, I think, word for word the quote. So you have
Yeah.
your memory is a lot better than mine, Anna. So, which it shows by your work. But I wanted to have you on because you wrote an article actually on your Every Square Inch blog, website, or whatever, and you were talking about the election, right? And so I kind of wanted to have you on to talk about post-election now. Now we've got lots of cabinet members that have come out even after I asked you to come on. Trump's putting out letters and saying, "Hey, here's going to be the cabinet here and there." But as far as post-election, how should Christians be viewing what's going on in America, and what should we be doing as a result of kind of what's going on and transpired here in the last month?
Okay. Well, first of all, let's note that the alternative to Trump
Mm,
would have been, I think, disastrous.
that's fair.
The unbelievably radical pro-abortion
Hmm.
position, all 9 months nationalized, the removal of any conscience protections for medical professionals to
Right.
participate in abortions, the radical trans agenda,
Hmm.
the attacks on free speech, creating essentially a censorship system that means that if you dissent from any government approved messages, you'll be silenced. All of these kinds of things were being proposed were would have been would have created a very, very hostile environment for the church.
For
Okay,
sure.
so with that in mind, Trump's election was, I think, a good thing.
Yeah.
What it does is it provides us with a certain amount of breathing space.
Yeah, I agree.
Having said that, there are undoubtedly some good things that I think Trump will be doing.
Hmm.
But we shouldn't kid ourselves into thinking that this is going to solve all of our problems.
That's right.
Again, to quote Chuck Colson, the kingdom is not going to arrive on Air Force One.
Right.
Okay. The people draw analogies with Trump. They say he's like Cyrus,
Mm,
or occasionally he's like Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going to get good people around him and all of that sort of thing.
mm,
I think that maybe a better analogy would be to look at the history of the Kingdom of Judah. Now, I want to be very careful here. I am not saying that the United States is in the
yes,
same relationship to God as the Kingdom of Judah is.
that's right.
But there is something that's really interesting when you look at the Kingdom of Judah. The Over and over again, you see the the decline of Judah. They're falling into idolatry, they're falling into sin, and so on. But then you get these revivals
Hmm.
where there are kings that are actually approved. That this was a good king. He did all of these things.
Right.
But over and over again, you see these kings did not remove the high places.
Mm,
Now, high places were pagan sanctuaries
hmm.
on the top of mountains. That's why they were called
Hmm.
high places. Um, because the pagan world, and frankly, actually, even in the Bible, the sense is that you meet the gods on mountains.
Right.
Okay, so pagan sanctuaries they had them all over the place, but frequently you would find these at the top of mountains. So the good kings may have eliminated Baal worship and things like that, in Jerusalem and in the surrounding areas, but they let the pagan sanctuaries stand up in the high places. And then once the good king dies, the fact that you've got these seeds of paganism still in the kingdom meant
Mm,
that it came roaring back.
hmm. Yeah.
And this happens over and over and over again until it gets to the point where it crosses the point of no return. And it's interesting when you look at why this happens, why it is that God ultimately says that Judah's going to go down. It's because they, quote, filled the land with innocent blood. And then, even when you get a good king who finally removes all the high places and everything else, like Josiah,
Hmm.
it's too late.
Mm,
And Josiah dies young, and his heirs revert to paganism, and Israel, or excuse me, and Judah goes into exile
Mm.
because they're past the point of no return. When I look at Trump in light of this history of Judah, what I see is somebody who is doing a lot of the right things, but he is still not removing the high places, as it were. And in particular, the high places in America where we are worshiping
Right.
is functionally in two areas. We could probably articulate a few more, but consumerism is a main one.
Hmm.
Okay. But also sex.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, although they're talking a hard line on the transgender thing, and good for them, at
Right.
least with women in sports, and good for them on that, they're probably going to cut federal funding for trans stuff. They're women in
Right.
sports. That's a good thing.
Sure.
But he is he's pro-choice.
Hmm.
HHS nominee Robert Kennedy is pro-choice.
Hmm.
They're not pro-abortion the way the Democrats are, but they're pro-choice. They're not pro-life.
Right.
And we have to acknowledge that. We have to recognize that.
And I think
And
I would say like Vice President Vance, before he came underneath Trump, was definitely pro-life.
right,
And then he had to kind of adopt, and he watched his words carefully, I feel like, a lot of times, but it still wasn't. He definitely changed his rhetoric to
mm,
fit underneath Trump. Whether he would say under the Trump administration this and this and this, right? He wouldn't necessarily say I believe, right, or I think, or whatever anymore. And but so that shows what you're saying, where sometimes these kings come in and they don't get rid of high places, right? All the high places. Trump's taken some of them down, and some of them we might call middle places, right? As you're going up to the high place, we're going to get rid of that, but we're going to keep the high, right?
right.
And to use the analogy, I guess. But people are falling in line with him because they were told one of the reasons why they lost 2020, the Republicans, right, and Trump, is because of their pro-life stance, right, their
Mhm.
abortion stance, and so they reeled back. Is that fair to,
Right.
to say?
I think that that is fair to say. And I'll be honest with you, I like Vance a lot, but I was kind of disappointed because he really does look like he's compromised himself on that one.
100%. Yep,
Yeah.
100%.
And the thing to remember is what was the thing that God said was the reason why Judah was taken out? It was because they filled the land with innocent
Yep,
blood.
yep,
We have
yeah,
somewhere around, I think this is conservative, when you take into account chemical abortions, but we have
yeah,
somewhere in the vicinity of 70 million
right,
abortions that were done in this country.
yep,
Um, that's over twice as many people as we have alive in this country right now. If that's not filling the land with innocent blood, I don't know what is.
mm,
And that high place is not being removed.
no,
And
no.
the fact is that if history is any guide, pro-choice leads to pro-abortion.
Yeah, yeah. They always say they're just going to move the needle this much, right? And then that's only just a foothold to move it all the way, right? That's
Right.
all they're doing, and it's incrementalism on the other side, right?
Yeah. So, um, my bottom line here is that Trump has given us a certain amount of breathing space.
Hmm. Hmm.
But, well, number one, the trajectory of the culture is against us by and large on the certainly the pro-life cause. And that particular cause is, it seems to me, extraordinarily important, judging
Right,
by the way God judged Judah.
right,
Um, the trajectory in the culture is probably with us on trans, which I think is a help with Trump. I think that was part of it.
right,
But by and large, um, Aaron Renn has a thesis that says that Christianity has moved from being considered a positive in the culture up to about 1994.
right.
and then from 94 to 2014 being a negative, and then from 2014 on, up to 2014 being neutral, and then from 2014 on being a negative. He's modified it a little bit in the wake of Trump's election,
Sure.
but but I'm not sure that, I have to really take a look at his newest analysis here. But overall, the trend in the culture is really not toward Christianity. We are not at this point seeing a great revival. And politics is always downstream from culture.
Yeah.
There are situations in which what happens in politics and law shape culture because law serves law acts as a tutorial for a culture.
Right.
So, for example, the majority of people were against same-sex marriage until the Obergefell decision.
Yeah.
And once it became legal, people began to say, well, oh, well, okay, I guess it's legal, so it's okay.
Right. Right.
So there is a way in which what goes on a political and legal level can shape culture, but that's only when the culture is already soft.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
More often than not, what happens in culture shapes law and politics.
I think this goes with a kind of a thing I've been working on. And I've got Dr. George Grant. I'm sure
Oh yeah.
got him coming on coming soon, and I think at the time of this recording he's gonna be coming on a week later. And we kind of I want to touch with him because he's also historian. Like he loves history, all that stuff. Reads it, talks about it, writes about it. But you do too, and so I kind of want to ask you a little bit, and then we'll go on. But I'm looking back to the did you this happens all the time with me. I think it's because I talk with my hands. I don't know if you can see that. Do you see the hearts?
Yep.
What in the world?
Yep.
That's not you doing it. It's not me doing it, but I think it's my hands.
It's your hands, yeah. There's a setting on Zoom that if you do certain things with your hands, it only works on Macs, by the way. If you do certain things with your hands, it will generate.
This is gonna get this turned off because I speak with my hands constantly. So I give myself thumbs ups and hearts, I guess. So whatever. I've been is what is the difference between the revolution, right? The Revolutionary War and the men of that time, right? Compared to today's time. And it, it seems like they were ready to fight for liberties and freedoms in their own country, right? Creating their own independence, right? They were ready to fight for that with war, and we've kind of shifted to we would rather just post memes and maybe hard things on social media, but heaven forbid we get engaged in the public sphere, like the public circle, right? And public square is what I was looking at. And I'm not saying that hey we need to pick up guns, right? Don't please. I got to say that I have to say that because it's crazy out there and there's some crazy people, but there you had the Black Robe Regiment. You had pastors who were preaching on Sundays, taking off their robes and then going out and fight. And it's like we can't even get pastors to stand up to keep their church open. And it's like what is the difference? And I'll tell you what Grant gave me in a little piece after I ask you that. But what do you think the difference in the culture, the shape of our culture is? Is it lack of manliness? Is it what is it?
Well, one thing you need to remember is that only about 10% of the
That's
people
right.
in the colonies actually supported the revolution.
Right.
There
Right.
were probably a lot of others who were sympathetic, but only about 10% were actually active in
Well,
supporting it.
most of them blame Boston for everything, right? They did. Like
Yeah, well,
that's your
yeah,
fault. You go fight it. They're not here for us. George
yeah.
Washington is kind of one that stood up and said, "Hold on, they're going to come to us. We've got to do something."
Well, actually, Virginia had a lot of people who were heavily involved as well. So we got to be fair there. It's not all the New Englanders.
Right.
Although I would like to note that the church that I went to in Connecticut, which happened to be the one that Jonathan Edwards attended when he went to Yale,
Nice.
when news of Lexington and Concord got to Wethersfield, they rang the church bell to assemble the congregation in the meeting house because it is both the church and the place for public meetings.
Mm-hmm.
The congregation got together. The pastor went up into the pulpit, which we have in the church,
Oh my.
preached a sermon, and then he led the militia to Boston.
That's right.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Come on. Yeah.
yeah. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
I think the difference is that there are a couple of differences. One of them is that we've we've come up with a kind of civil religion in America over the years that's really kind of different from the sort of thing that you saw in the Revolution.
Mm.
Um, in the Revolution, especially up in New England, but even down into the other colonies, you have the effect of the First Great Awakening that
Hmm.
is really critical here. In the First Great Awakening, one of the main themes was a plowboy who reads the Bible and is converted
Hmm.
is actually the spiritual superior of a bishop who has not received conversion. And the reason why that's so important is it's fundamentally anti-hierarchical.
Hmm. Yep.
So the common people, even if they haven't been to seminary or anything like that, if they have been converted, are superior to clergy that haven't been converted.
Mm.
If that is the case, then it's possible that the common people are actually better than the king and the nobility.
Mm.
This undermining of hierarchy and the ability to actually question social structures, power structures, things like that,
Right.
is actually in the Great Awakening. The seed sown by the Great Awakening
Hmm.
ends up creating the context in which the revolution can actually occur. And most people underestimate the importance of that. Historians who've
Yeah.
studied it, though, are pretty clear that's part of it. Now, what has happened since then? Well, we've got this sort of Republican thing that gets established in America.
Hmm.
The founders established all right, late 18th century is the beginnings of, we call it capitalism. I prefer free market.
Fair.
Okay.
Either way, I
And
love it. But yeah, go ahead.
and and the reason why I like free market is it ties in with a whole bunch of other things.
Mm.
When you look at economics and politics, and actually a few other things, including religion, freedom of speech, things like that, they're all based on a common set of assumptions about natural human relations.
Right.
And so they go together. So if, for example, to take the other side of it, if you are a socialist,
Hmm.
what that says is we should allow the experts to control the economy.
Right.
That leads to we should allow the experts to control the government. It leads to technocracy.
Right.
And it can also lead very easily to we should allow the experts to control the flow of information.
Science, even. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of those kinds of things go together as a package because it says fundamentally that society should be essentially hierarchical with the expert class running things
Right.
and
Right.
determining what's done and all of those kinds of things.
Sure.
If you go to a free
But
marketplace, what does it say?
real quick on the expert side of things, who is picking the experts, right? That's where
Uh,
socialism starts to really unravel and you start to see it for what it is. It's the
mm,
hierarchy that's calling themselves experts or bringing in who they want because they agree with
mm,
the hierarchy, right? So they're going to bring in those people just because they agree. And then that is the well they're experts, right? We saw this even in our own country during COVID, right? Experts, and then we've actually come to know that some of these experts were just playing a game, right? They really
right.
were. I mean, for like, so that's where, yeah, we've seen it all over where that socialism just creates a hierarchy and kind of an ivory tower, and you have to be a part of that ivory tower to make any decision on who experts are, right?
Right. Yeah. And it becomes a self-perpetuating thing. And frankly, it doesn't work. Yeah,
Correct.
which is
Right.
exactly your point.
Right.
Now look at what happens if you go to the idea of, well, let's say free markets.
Mhm.
Free markets go with republicanism always. Why? Because in a free market, what it says is I decide who I'm going to work for. The employer decides who I'm going to hire. We negotiate together on what wages are going to be. And then once I make my living, I have the right to decide what I'm going to spend my money on.
Hmm.
And I spend my money on things that I get to decide if I want my money more than I want that product, or if I
Absolutely.
want that product more than I want the money. And the person selling it decides I want the product more than I want the money, or I want the money more than I want the product. So
Right.
it's a free choice thing here.
I
But
actually
in
feel like it
essence,
creates an accountability too, right? Because it
right.
holds the people who are making the product accountable. Because if you make junk, no one really wants to buy junk. Even though you might have great marketing that will sell it at the beginning, it will ultimately fail because people know that it's junk, right? For
Right.
lack of better terms.
So what I do basically is when I'm buying a product or going to a store, I am voting to keep that company in business.
Correct.
Similarly, when I vote for somebody in office, I'm buying what they're selling.
Sure. Sure.
So there's a commonality between the two. The concept is I should be able to make my choices about who I want to represent me,
Right.
who I want to do business with, who I want to, all of these kinds of things. Oh,
Right.
and by the way, it also connects into free speech
Yeah. Because it's free. Yeah.
because I get to listen, I get to decide who I want to listen
Right.
to and who I want to ignore.
And some of it might be disinformation. That's the new term, right? But you get to decide with because now we have a plethora of information, especially today, right? So
And
we can weigh the
I get to
odds, and,
sort
right?
I get to sort through it and decide which voices make the best sense to me, and I get to listen to those.
Correct. And to your point about Kamala at the beginning saying that their side was going deeper into taking those away. I mean, they were literally saying they should be the arbitrage on what information you get to have.
Because they're the experts.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. See, so all right. So this again, note that there's a fundamental assumption about human nature
Thanks. Yeah.
and natural relationships that's at work that unifies all of these different things. This is something I've never seen anybody who discusses this.
Mm,
This is something that I've sort of observed and put together. I've
sure.
never seen anybody who seems to get this.
Mm,
And I think it's really important. No, so what happens in America? Oh, where this goes. Why do we have freedom of religion in America?
hmm.
It's because in the late 18th century, you get Adam Smith, 1776, The Wealth of Nations.
Hmm.
Across the board, all the Enlightenment thinkers are arguing for some variation on free markets. Even Edmund Burke, the founder of conservatism, is arguing for something like free markets.
Hmm.
This is an idea that is really the big idea in the 18th century.
Right.
When when they set up the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment, number one, it only applies to Congress. It doesn't apply to the states. Number
Which
two,
is why states had certain religions or
right,
Baptist or Methodist, and you would move based on what they call it. You would move based on what your denomination per se was, right? You would
or you could, yeah.
Baptist or
And
yeah,
and an establishment of religion means a state religion. That's what an
yeah,
established religion was in the 18th century.
yep, that's
You
right.
don't want to do that. Number one, because you don't want to pick one, because then you'll have problems with colonies who had a different one.
Sure.
But number two, they explicitly said that basically we want a free marketplace of ideas
Mm,
and let the best ideas win. They believed that by not establishing a religion, it would make religion flourish.
okay.
Because just like not having a controlled economy will make
Right.
the economy flourish, not having controlled religion will make religion flourish.
Well, they just came out of a country, right, that established a religion.
Right.
And that, the Puritans left because of some of those things, right? They're like, hey,
Yeah.
you're trying to make us do this. And so they're also coming with that in mind
Well,
as they're creating these things, right?
you have to be careful. In 1689, I believe it was, the Edict of Toleration in England allowed for toleration. There was still an established religion, but it
Right.
allowed for the toleration of Trinitarian Protestants.
Mm, okay.
So they did have that. But they're very self-consciously aiming for a free marketplace of ideas with respect to religion, which in fact makes religion flourish in America much more than in Europe for the next several hundred years.
So we
A
started
couple
this
hundred years.
to try to figure out. There goes my thumbs up, by the way. Started
Mhm.
to try to figure out um, what is the difference between the revolution people, right, and then us today. And you're laying that foundation in my mind, right? You're laying a foundation now of even though the 10% were there, there was still kind of a foundational consensus on who they were ish, right? Especially
Mm.
with the 10%. If you're going to put a number on it, you're going to say about 10%. That created a definitely a, they're like, no, we're going to fight for freedoms that we think we should have, right? And are we, do we even have 10% in America today that would still stand on free markets, free ideas, free opinions, freedom of speech, freedom of religion? All would we, do we still have that 10% today? And has the way we fight for that changed?
Okay. So, yeah, I started with religion because, well, number one, you sort of fed me the Black Robe Regiment.
Right.
But what ends up happening, I think, is within the churches, we end up getting a sort of, even though we've got a range of denominations, there's sort of a de facto civil religion that develops in America,
Mm,
that is not, that does not, that sees sort of being part of the church and being an American as being sort of the same thing.
okay.
And that you even run into this in not just in the mainline churches where this was really true in the 50s, for example, but
Hmm.
even you run into it in evangelical churches where they seem to think that Christianity rises or falls with America.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so which is patently false. Right now, the gospel
Absolutely.
is exploding around the world, but always in what we used to call the third world or the developing
Correct.
world.
We
Now
actually
we
need
call it the global
missionaries
south.
now. We need missionaries, right? We used to
Yeah.
send tons and tons. We need them now. Yeah.
Yeah, but so you've got that. So the churches have become sort of complacent in a lot of ways in terms of identifying Christianity. I'm just, excuse me, turning down the ringer
Oh,
on my phone. It was just going off.
yeah.
Um, um, Christianity, I think, in America has sort of become complacent in the sense that they identify too much with the country. The country as a
Ooh,
whole has become complacent in that they assume that we've got these freedoms and the country is always going to defend them and
yeah.
things like that.
Right.
And they've also lost the sense of the value of these freedoms.
Yep.
So increasingly, particularly with younger people, because we've allowed them to be indoctrinated into these ideas,
Come on.
a significant percentage of college students, for example, don't really believe in free speech.
Mm.
There have been surveys that are done on them where they think that speech that they find offensive should be shut down.
Right, right. And this is coming from our higher elite colleges. This is coming from Harvard and Princeton. I mean,
Right.
these ideas are being spread through these colleges to where if you bring someone to speak that I disagree with, I can say it's hurting my mental health, right? And if we get enough people to say that, then I've seen literally deans of those college, presidents of those colleges send out a I'm sorry letter, an apology letter to all the students, and just because of a person coming to speak that's got different opinions than they do.
Right. Well, I mean, Georgetown, after the election,
Yeah.
actually had all kinds of activities to
Oh
help the
no.
students cope with
Oh
the
no.
results, including one period where they had milk and cookies.
By
Literally, I am
the way,
not
I'll
joking.
take that, but I don't need it because of the election. Holy cow.
You talk about infantilizing.
What in the world? I mean, we're treating them like 6-year-olds.
Yeah, yeah.
Holy smokes. I didn't know that. I actually haven't seen that yet. Wow. So we've definitely become to pacify one our the human race in America, right? Our citizens. We've pacified them. But then also we've affirmed all these any crazy idea you can come up with, we're affirming. And we have weakened our even ability to think logically. Is that fair?
I think all that's true.
and here we had guys in the in 1700 or 18th century, right, beginning to dream and to think about starting their own independent country. Like I'm looking at our culture today, and by the way, we had in this election, as far as Trump goes, he definitely won the I think they're called Gen Z now. He won that vote. That shocked me. I'll be real honest with you, but that shocked me. And a lot of them were young men. I'm talking 18, 19, 20-year-old men, right, in
Right.
colleges who have said, I've had enough. And I think to your point, a lot of that, the trans stuff, the furries, all those things going on inside of their high schools and then now colleges, all the affirmations of these things. I think the left overplayed their hand, and that has forced people to go the other route. I think if you break down the colleges, I would almost be willing to put money on this if I was betting. The freshman sophomore line to the junior senior is probably, they all probably voted differently. That's my opinion on that, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think that one of the things that when it comes to the younger men, I think one of the things we also have to take into account, well, what they say is the concern on the surveys is I want to have a job.
Yeah.
I want to be able to make a living. I
Right.
want to be able to buy a house. I
Right.
want to, I want to be able to start a family, all of those
Yeah.
kinds of
The
things.
economy. Yep.
So the economy is the thing that shows up overwhelmingly in the surveys. I
Wow.
think though that there's a subtext as well here, though. All of the resources are being thrown at women.
Mm.
The university that I was in had and I quote, a permanent committee on the concerns of women.
Okay.
This, despite the fact that women are more likely to go to college,
Yeah.
to graduate from college, to get graduate degrees, and all of these kinds of things than men are. Men are dropping out of colleges. They're just not going.
Well,
They're dropping out of the workforce.
yeah, that's the sad part. Yeah.
So I think that men, I think part of this too is that generation especially, I suspect are tired of being scapegoated for everything that's wrong in the
Well,
world.
let's be real. It's been in the church too, right? You've heard it, and you've seen people kind of bring this up now, where you have the Mother's Day sermon, right? And it
Mhm.
is really nice, and it's good, and we give roses, and I think we should do all of that, right, to mothers. But then you have the Father's Day sermon where they're throwing rocks and bashing men and saying just harsh things, right, to them. And it's like, okay, I think you're right. I think men, especially young men, are just tired of being beat up for these things and not, or even just overlooked. Right. And now, again, I try to be fair. Some of it we brought on ourselves, right? Because
Mhm.
we have taken a back seat, and that's some of the fall, from Genesis. We tend to take a back seat sometimes, right? And we've got to fight that urge, and we've actually got to take leadership roles and actually ownership, responsibility. Most of the men, especially younger men, it is hard for them seemingly to take responsibility. They just don't want to. Whether
Mhm.
it's asking a girl to the dance, well, I don't want to do that. Let her ask me, right? Because they're too scared, right?
Well,
Or
well,
whether it's
but
actually
but
going to work.
but why are they scared?
True. I
Why?
think, yeah, that's the chicken
Because
and the egg thing, right?
is it sexual harassment?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I mean,
Yeah,
they have gotten so many messages
that's true.
that anything along those lines, I mean, how do you even begin to navigate the world that they were raised in?
Uh, I actually think you're right. I do. I think that is very true. It is tough to navigate whenever anything you say or do can be spun and twisted. And you know what? It's not that hard to go back to God's law and say, hey, if there's false accusations, then the same punishment should be put on the accuser as the accused, right?
Mm.
And I think that's pretty fair treatment. But we don't do that, right? They had a whole thing during Brett Kavanaugh, which was believe all women. You remember that? And
Yeah.
that took off, and it was like I think it got hammered later, but it
Yeah,
took off. That's
believe
scary.
all women unless they're accusing Democrats, by the
Yeah.
way. We've got the second half of that.
No, yeah, you're right. You're right. There was a clause that was added to that wasn't there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but that's the thing. That's the environment that these younger guys. They were kids during that time, right? But they're hearing this. By the way, social media, TikTok, all that stuff. Even though sometimes it's false, a lot of times, but it has. I run a youth facility. I've seen it. I'm seeing 13, 14-year-olds talk more about the economy, politics. They're asking me questions about, well, who did you vote for? Why? What's this? I wasn't talking like that when I was 13. I didn't even know what was going on. I was playing basketball. That was it, right? But we didn't have that information at their fingertips. So they see all this stuff. They know it. They're hearing it. And I think you nailed it. I think growing up and trying to navigate that has really made them timid and fear. And they just said, you know what? I'll back off because if I do anything, it's going to be mistrued and then I'm going to get in trouble, basically, for trying to use younger language. And that wasn't, by the way, that wasn't happening. If we go back to that wasn't happening in the 18th century. That stuff wasn't taking place.
Yeah. I think the other part of it too, though, that is one of the other reasons is we live pretty comfortable lives by
Yeah.
and large.
Yeah. What's what's that quote out there about, hard times create strong men? You've heard it, right? You've
Yeah.
seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think if you brought the founders today and showed them our tax rates,
Oh my.
I mean, the tax rates that they were under in the colonial period
Yeah.
that they started a revolution over are laughable compared to what we
Mm.
pay.
Do you
Uh,
actually know like around about those numbers? I have it
Not,
somewhere, but I can't
yeah,
remember.
I don't remember them off the top of my head.
Right.
I'm a Europeanist, not an Americanist, but they were much lower than anything that we pay now.
Sure.
But
Sure.
because we're such a prosperous country, we're really doing pretty well. We're pretty comfortable,
Yeah.
even with the higher tax rates.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, literally, America has created more millionaires than any other country right now. I mean, I'm saying in our time. I don't know about Rome and all that stuff back in the day, how much money, but I would say
Oh no,
probably not,
no, yeah,
because the
we
free
are the most
market that we have.
prosperous
Right.
country across the board, and we've created more great wealth across the board than any country ever.
Right. I mean, even go back to J.D. Rockefeller and Carnegie, right?
Mhm.
Still, J.D. Rockefeller still is the richest man to ever live, right? According to inflation and all that stuff, that's what they would say. Still, now I will say this: Elon's getting closer, right?
Yeah,
I get it.
yeah.
Apple,
There are probably a few small countries that have a higher per capita income and things like that, but they're pretty small.
right? And,
You know,
and
there would be something like Luxembourg, maybe. I don't know. I'd have to check, but
I've kind of stated we've lived off of borrowed morality for a
mhm.
long time, right? And that's made us comfortable, right? And then that always allows us to forget where we came from. History is being forgotten, right? We're not even teaching history necessarily as far as truth, right? Inside of schools and things like that. It's been manipulated and all these different things, right? But by and large, there is no doubt that having the wealth and having then the borrowed morality, as I would call it, has created us to be lazier. And what's interesting is we export sometimes our talent, but we import so much goods because we have so much money, right?
Right.
So we bring in so many that which creates us to be even more lazier, right? If you will.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so
and again, what are our gods? Consumerism.
consumerism, which means we have to, because of the amount that we're consuming, and we want it cheap, right? But the amount that we're consuming, we have to import those things. It seems like,
Mhm.
and then we're killing off our citizens. We're killing off our young. We're killing off by abortion and stuff, right? So now we have to even import workers. Right, because of those things, and we've heard Bill Clinton said it. Right, I mean, he said it out loud just here recently. Right, well, the reason why we have to bring in foreign people, we have to actually allow immigration to come in, is because we're not having enough babies. Well, why is that, Bill? Like why is that? And by the way, Bill Clinton was against abortion whenever he was president, right? And
Mhm.
so he at least his rhetoric.
Safe, legal, and rare.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what he would say. Yeah, and so the Democrat Party doesn't say that today, but the Republican Party doesn't say what they used to say either. So I do think you're right. There's a lot of factors that have created our society as today. Basically, is to sum it up, right? And a lot of these factors have created soft men. A lot of these factors have created soft churches. George Grant actually would said it's because our churches are soft that we don't have the same mentality as we did in the 18th century, right? It's and you brought up the Great Awakening, you brought all those things, but because we have a soft society, the churches have seemed to codify that, or maybe they were even the beginning of that. I don't know. I'd like to hear your opinion on that. Did the culture transform the church, or did the church actually allow for the culture? Right.
Yeah. That's why I started with civil religion.
Right.
They just sort of melded with American culture, and where the culture went, the church followed.
And really, the church should be setting the culture
Right.
and going for that. The church should be speaking to the culture.
It
And
should be a thermostat, not a thermometer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so how do we grow and fix that mentality as believers? How do we continue? Because we have now, I think, an overcorrection idea with the Christian nationalist stuff, right? I think that's a far overcorrection. Again, it all depends on what their definition is and blah
Yeah.
blah, blah, right? All that stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think we all can agree on the basis, of course, we would love the majority of the people in our country to be Christians. That is our goal, right? That's every believer's goal. That's why we share the gospel. That's why we do what we do. That's why we preach. That's why all that stuff. That's a baseline. But how do we begin to get churches? And I think I see the remnant of that. I think that's growing. That remnant's growing, in my opinion, as I'm talking to people, as I'm seeing things. But how do we get that to shift where the church is actually the meeting house again, where the church is actually building the culture, not being a subset of the culture?
Okay. I know he's controversial, and I don't agree with everything he does.
Sure.
But I think Doug Wilson and what he's doing in Moscow, Idaho, is a great example of how this works.
Agreed.
And again, I'm not endorsing everything Doug does. I like Doug. When I've got some of my books published at Canon Press. I go to Moscow.
Yeah.
Doug and I always get together for lunch. I like him. I mean, so I'm not throwing stones at him, but he's like anybody else. I don't agree with him 100%.
And he doesn't agree with you 100%, I'm sure.
That's right.
Oh, we are.
Because
That's people.
because
right.
if two people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary.
That's right. Right.
Okay.
Or
So
lying. Yeah.
yeah. So with that disclaimer, what
Yeah.
did he do? He built a church that created a very strong community
Right.
that is intertwined with Moscow, Idaho. Moscow has the University of Idaho there.
Right.
But if you go to Moscow, it seems most of the businesses in downtown Moscow are owned by people in Doug's church. A
That's true.
significant percentage of them are.
Yeah.
The key meeting places are owned by people in his church.
Their festivals have been started or are now ran by people in his church.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, what did they do? They created, and this is a church that is absolutely uncompromising in terms of what it believes. The university absolutely hates them,
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
but they are doing incredible things. What did they do? They created a tight community built around a solid, really, a solid core set of Christian beliefs, reformed in this case.
What are they? What are they? Because I think that's good for our listeners to know.
They're in a group called the CREC. It's a
Right.
it's a reformed, basically Presbyterian.
Yeah.
Well, I would say it is Presbyterian, but far more liturgical than
Majority. Yeah.
most.
Right.
Um, a reformed, Presbyterian style thing that understands the cultural mandate, the idea that Christians are to create culture.
Ooh.
Not just evangelize. They do evangelize, but they're also to create culture, and they go out and they unapologetically live this out.
Yeah.
But again, note the strong community focus. This is one of the things that Rod Dreher got really right in the book, The Benedict Option. I think he shot himself in the foot with the title.
Sure.
But what he was talking about was the importance of Christians creating strong communities, intentional communities, Number one, so that their kids can be raised in them, because values are formed in community. And if we
Mhm.
don't have strong communities to pass our values on to our kids, the world will do it for us gleefully.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that was one of the things Rod was emphasizing. But it seems to me Moscow is a great example of what Rod was talking about,
Mm.
because you have that, but you also have a community that is integrated into the surrounding world, that
Mhm.
provides a visible example of something that's different,
Right.
that is acting as salt and light, and yes, leaven, shaping the surrounding community.
Yeah.
That's what we need. We need to have churches that provide a clear and visible alternative to what the world is offering. There are, and as we do this, we will find people will hate us. Jesus promised us that.
Right. I mean, they some of those businesses have hired people just to clean their windows off because of all the spit, and they have to do it twice or three times a day because the students and some of the liberal people in the town will just spit all over their windows, and so they have to clean them multiple times a day. I mean, this
Mhm.
is crazy to me. Like it's like I live in rural America, right? And I will tell you in rural because I live south of you, and but I live in a place that we are actually the reddest county in Indiana. Okay,
Okay.
yet so conservative values is what you would think from that, right? Christian even because we're like I would consider us either the tip of the belt or the buckle, right? Whichever way you put the belt, right?
Okay.
And so of the Bible belt. But I'm telling you things like I've said things like, "Hey, a woman is not a pastor," right? And you would think that that would be okay to say inside of rural Bible Belt America. And I've had, and here's the thing that got me the most: I've had Catholics come at me hardcore because I said that. Which, by the way, I don't know about you, Dr. Sunshine, but I don't remember the last here. Now, there's been people who have faked it, but I don't remember the last female pope that was elected because they were female, right? But
Right. Yeah.
yet, but yet,
And,
I
and they're
got
still not
hammered.
allowed to have female priests.
Correct. And I
Yeah.
got hammered by some Catholics. And I'm like, what is happening? Right.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so to your thing is when you stand on biblical principles and you say, and here's these businesses aren't they are not the let's take what the world has given us and just make them Christian. They're coffee shops that are just coffee shops, right?
Mhm.
Now they're owned by a Christian man and
Mhm.
woman, right, or whatever, but they're just coffee shops.
Yeah.
And they just want to
Boothers.
go out there and make good coffee and have good coffee in a good environment for people to come in and enjoy a good cup. And they get hammered
Mhm.
because they found out they're part of a Christ church, right?
Yeah.
So I do think it's so you're saying
So,
so
but there's another side to it.
sure,
As we do that, as we provide a visible, functioning community as an alternative,
right.
I think it will. There are some people who are going to look at that and say, all right, there's something here. I may
Mm,
not know what it is.
yeah,
People may be saying bad things about it, but there's something here.
right, right.
Um, Jesus promised us the world would hate us. But it's also worth noting that when Jesus sent out the 12 and when he sent out the 70, what did he tell them to do? Luke 10, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons, and tell them that the kingdom is at hand.
Mm-hmm,
Notice the order.
mm-hmm.
It's show and tell. Show them what the kingdom looks like and tell them
And
about
then
it.
proclaim that it's here. Yeah,
So forget the miraculous side of it.
sure,
What I'm talking about is creating communities that show what the alternative is. What does the kingdom actually look like,
right.
to provide a foundation for telling people about it? Why should you even believe this? What does Jesus say? By this, all men will know you're my disciples if you love one another.
Right.
You show them what it looks like to live in that kind of community.
Yeah. And then people
And
want to be involved in that community, right?
that will provide something that's different. It'll provide an alternative to the chaos and insanity of the world.
Yeah.
That's what we got to do.
Yeah. One of my least favorite things is when I'll use this for instance. There was a video game out when I was younger, and it was called Guitar Hero, right? And
Mm,
you plug it, and you had this fake guitar, and all this stuff. Well, like 5 years, 6 years, so the patent probably died out or something. The moment that died out, well, then it was Christian Guitar Hero, right? And it would just have Christian songs on there. And they just took exactly a product that someone came up with and they just slapped a Christian label on it. I can't stand that to my core, right? Like that drives me insane. And then by the way, there's a good market for that. This is why we have Pureflix and all those different things, right? There is a market for that. But and that was just a side note. I just wanted to I guess I just wanted to let everybody know I can't stand that. But the thing that going back to Doug Wilson, I think in modern times, right, we have a picture of preaching and teaching from there goes my preaching and teaching from the church that led to, right, a community and people actually loving their community through businesses, through education, through all these things. And it flowed from the pulpit, right? It flowed from that. And that's something that I want to kind of do. I want to go back and hear the early message. Now, Doug has said before, his dad is the one who paved the way. Right. And he's the one who chose even Moscow. And he's the one that had the idea of strategically picking where he went on. And then Doug came on and built on that foundation. Right. Even though him and his dad, would disagree on certain theological things and all this stuff. But I've heard Doug say that's what's happened. And so, but I think for our time, we get to see the overflow of preaching actually affect the everyday life. And this goes to your every square inch, right? But it affects everyday life of the believer. And in fact, what looks like evangelism, which, I grew up Baptist. So what do? Well, we got together and knocked on doors and passed out tracts. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Go for it. I've seen many people become church members and saved because people went out and did that. But as I'm looking from the outside on Moscow, you've been there, I haven't. They're going and they're doing psalm singing, right? In the middle of the public square. And and all of a sudden their numbers grow, right? They get 5 people say, I want to be a part of that. They're going out and people are finding out that, hey, this coffee might just taste better because the people who are making it want to actually serve and do better, right? Christians should be the best workers, the best business owners, the best thinkers, all of that. Christians should actually be the best of that because 1, we have the Holy Spirit, right? And 2, God commands us to do all things as if we're doing it unto the Lord, right? And so this has been kind of my thing, but I haven't seen that in my lifetime. I haven't seen that overflow of what a pulpit can do, if you will. I've seen people coming to church, hearing, and then going home and doing their everyday lives.
Yeah. If I can put in a shameless plug, I have a book called 32 Christians Who Changed Their World. This isn't directly out of pastors, but these are people who just lived out a biblical worldview in all kinds of walks of life from all around the world in all kinds of centuries. And they're examples of this sort of thing in practice.
Wow. Yeah. And where can you get that, by the way? I'll put it in the show notes too.
You can get it. I would prefer you either get it through my website or Canon Press, but you can get it through Amazon as well. Sure. I'd rather have Canon get the profit from it rather than Amazon. Or if you get it through me, I get a little extra royalty on it.
There you go. Hey, and it's true. This is how we create. This is how we create a Christian. We talk about this Christian nationalism and all this stuff, right? And some of them just want to overtake the government, and that's what they want. And by the way, we need Christian government. 100%.
Quick note on that. We've got a free marketplace of ideas, which means we are allowed to advocate for our values,
correct,
and laws and things like that, just like anybody else. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not the same as what some of these more extreme views that are labeled Christian nationalism are.
Correct.
I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with advocating for our values in law.
Absolutely. And that's where I'm at. And that at the beginning, by the way, I could care less if someone called me a Christian nationalist because I'm like, well, whatever. And now I'm like, well, because some of the cream kind of rose to the top and that cream is not something that I want to be associated with.
The problem with the term is it has no firm definition. And what I just said, that we should be able to advocate for our laws, would get me labeled a Christian nationalist by some people.
Right. But so I say this on about every podcast, but people probably think but Dusty Deaver's down in Oklahoma, right? Doing a fantastic job, and really try. He's a state senator, and he's a pastor, and he's really advocating for Christian worldview in Oklahoma government, right? And it's been phenomenal. I just won a county commissioner seat, and so January I take over, and that there was a reason why I wanted to run, right? And because I do believe that every bit of this world. That there again there is nothing that Jesus doesn't cry mine, and I 100% believe that, and so I want to take it to there, but literally the everyday people that you're talking about, it is going to church, right? And some of it's so ordinary that people are like, this isn't that fun. Well, hold on here, right? Like it's going to church, it's listening to the preaching, and then it's going and doing, right? It's actually doing what you've heard. It's doing what, because it's transforming your life. And that means that that you should be a good dad, a good mother. You should be training your children to fear the Lord. You should be getting their education, right, where their education is actually teaching them to fear the Lord, right? All
Yeah.
of those things happen. There's no neutrality in this world, and I think that we bought into that for too long as a church, and we have quit speaking to that. And again, I think there should be businesses that are created because of your preaching, right? Like I really do. I really do.
Yeah, we need to remember that Jesus's method from building the kingdom is the exact opposite of the way we want to do it.
Mm,
We like things top down. Jesus always starts small.
yeah. Yeah.
It's a mustard seed.
This is why I love Michael Foster saying, and I use it. And I text him and ask him if I could use it about a year ago, and he said, "Well, I don't even think I created it, but sure, yeah, go ahead." But it's when we're talking about government or localism, or where we should put our time and work into. He says, "County before country and Christ above all." Right, and so I think yes. We have to keep a look on the country. We have to keep a look on these things. We have to speak into those things, but we have got to work with our hands right here in our local, wherever God has placed us, right in our local
Exactly.
community, and we have to start really advocating and taking the gospel to every area of that community, right? And that's schools, and that's government, and that's businesses, and that's churches, and that's all of the above, and that's your households. And I asked Andrew Sandlin one time. I said, "Hey, out of all the spheres, which sphere would you say people should really focus on?" And that's setting aside the self government. And he said, "Well, really, family." He said, "Because when you have strong families, then that creates strong churches, and when you have strong churches, and if your opinion on which I think is right, on how the culture goes, if you have strong churches, well, then you're going to have strong governments, right? Because the culture is now speaking, and governments should be a servant to the people. And so they're going to do what the people want. You know what I mean? So that's where he said he would focus most, which I loved. And because I think that's very true. Some of us get it flipped, and we think the top, which is the government, we should work our way down. The government's not going to create a strong family. I'm just telling you. They
Right.
can hinder that by some laws or whatever, right? But they're not going to create strong families.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, I went on a little tangent there, but hey, we have. I think we could talk for a long time, or I would like to talk for a long time. And but I appreciate you so much for coming on. Again, note the beginning of what we were talking about, where yeah, there are some good things that me and Dr. Sunshine would both agree that Trump is going to advocate for and going to put into action. There are some things that aren't very good, and also, and no, we didn't expect him to be perfect. We didn't vote for a perfect candidate, and I don't think I ever have. And but we do want to call into account those things that aren't biblical, those things that are actually leading the culture away, those things that aren't tearing down the mountaintop pagan worship stuff that we have, which literally the main one is abortion. And we've gone away from that already in the Republican Party, and I hope that it starts to come back somewhere, somehow. So note that at the beginning, that's what we're doing, or that's how we would see the election. We're excited for the future, but we're also, to me, I'm still a little bit worried about those pagan mountaintop things. So thank you so much, fellow Hoosier, for coming on here and talking with us. Any last words you want to say, and where can people find your website? What is your website?
Again, it's esquareinch.org. That's ESQUAREINCH.org.
Yeah. So I'll put that stuff in the show notes. Go grab his book about those ordinary men who, and what's the title one more time?
32 Christians Who Changed Their World.
Oh, go and grab that book from his website, or even Canon Plus. That's where he would rather you have it. But either way, he wants it in your hands. Go look at that and take from that and go out and build. As always, guys, we appreciate you. We love you, and we'll see you again next time.